Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are. Hello and welcome to episode 192 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Chris, and this is Paris.
Hello.
This time, we read Planet X by Michael Jan Friedman. At the behest of our patron Fred. We hope you enjoy the episode, Fred, and thank you so much for supporting the show. If this is your first time listening to this show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some other combination of the three. Sometimes, like today, we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend, so we do the opposite of what most people do in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet. Usually this experiment results in a hilariously disappointing read, but once in a while, we end up liking the book. Today's show includes our usual barnyard language, plus some minority oppression. Hooray!
Yeah, that's the deal. It's the 90s, so pop culture stuff is going to be all about that, I guess. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Wait, did this come out in the 90s or was this like a 2002 publishing date?
No, I actually don't know. Let's look up the published date. Planet X, Michael Jan Friedman, published date. Through the power of Google, May 1998. So yes, late 90s.
I figured 98. Okay. It had a 98 flavor to it. Tasted like Sobe.
Yes. I mean, I was never into those. I don't know why people lost their minds about it. It was just like different juice.
They were fucking disgusting. I thought they were horrible, but everyone was so excited.
It was like somewhere between a juice and a Gatorade, right? Like that's what I remember
somewhere
them being.
Between juice and a lava lamp, and I was gonna say yes.
Okay, also that's
Wait,
also accurate.
Am I thinking of the right drink?
No, Sobe looked like a lava lamp, kind of. They had like the two lizards, and there was like fun colors.
Maybe I'm thinking of something. Hang on, internet, save me. No,
Here we go. We're just Googling right at the top of the episode.
That's not what I was thinking of. What's the clear? All right, folks, there was a clear flavor drink in the 90s that had little floating globules in it, and it came in a glass bottle, and everyone was like all excited about it, and it tasted terrible, but it was cool. So
I know the thing you're talking about. I forgot its name. That did taste terrible. Sobe tasted a little bit better, but Sobe, like I said, was somewhere between a juice and a Gatorade, but they always had fun flavors.
Orbitz. Orbitz.
Oh yeah, Orbitz.
My brain merged Sobe and Orbitz together in my mind because I never drank that stuff. Orbitz is what I was thinking of. It is so bad.
Okay. Well, now that we've done our food digression, that must happen once per episode.
And you know what? Orbitz came out in 1997, so that was a perfect reference. This book was probably fueled by Orbitz, doing lines of
it came with some Orbitz and Sobe if you bought one.
All right, I am absolutely unhinged today, if you cannot already tell. I am exhausted, and I've had a lot to do, and I also had to mainline a terrible book in 16 hours. Not this one, a different one. That 16 hours included sleep, so it's been an interesting 2 days. So
yeah, Paris, why don't you take us away?
I'm on Planet X
on the
already.
Back of the books. Yes, you take us away to Planet X by reading the back of the book summary here. And then I'll do the characters and setting, and you can also do our summary. So you're a summarizer today, just to keep things nice and easy for you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm so glad that we were willing to switch entire personalities today because I needed that.
Let me know how it feels at the end of the episode.
Okay, I'll put a review on Chris's page. All right. All right, this is the back of the book summary. This is what was supposed to pull you into a bookshelf in 1998. On the planet Zaldia, ordinary men and women are mutating into bizarre creatures with extraordinary powers. But is this a momentous evolutionary leap? Or an unparalleled catastrophe? The very fabric of Zaldian society is threatened as fear and prejudice divide the transformed from their own kin. Dispatched to cope with the growing crisis, Captain Picard and the crew of the Starship Enterprise receive some unexpected visitors from another reality, in the form of the group of mutant heroes known as the Uncanny X-Men! Storm, leader of the X-Men, offers their help in resolving a situation that is agonizingly similar to the human and mutant conflicts of their own time and space. But when hostile aliens appear in orbits around Zaldia to try and abduct the transformed,
They're in the drink. Shit.
for use as a superpowered force in an attack on the Federation, even the combined forces of the crew of Starfleet and the X-Men may be unable to prevent an inferno of death and destruction. Starfleet's finest crew and Earth's greatest mutant heroes will need all their powers and abilities to save the Zaldian people and stop a deadly threat to the Federation.
All right, thank you for that, Paris. As for our characters and setting, I already have a bone to pick with you, the classic bone we have to pick. The setting is, of course, space, the final frontier, and the planet Shaldia is how I said it.
No! Jesus Christ, it's Zaldia.
Why do I want one or the other? What's your evidence to say that it can't be Shaldia?
Well, I guess it depends. Like, from which language does it derive? Because if it derives from Chinese,
well, neither, 'cause it's
I
mainly
might
planet.
agree with your no, but unclear, like, where the inhabitants of the planet came from, if they're indigenous or if they were
Their own planet.
brought there.
They came from the planet Shaldia.
Oh my!
The
All right,
planet.
Google. All right, I'm saying Zaldia. I feel like X H together is a Z, and you're saying it's a sh.
Because you'd have S and H together, and X is sometimes S-ish.
True. It depends on the language. So it seems like
Great.
you're going with what? Okay, you're going with a Zulu pronunciation, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
And maybe I'm just going with a Planet X pronunciation. I don't know if there's any credibility from my interpretation.
Okay, we'll go with yours. We'll go with Jaldia for now, because I also don't have any evidence to back mine up. So if you feel strongly about it, we'll go with Jaldia to prevent any confusion.
No, I think you might be right. I think I might be shamed from my fucking pronunciation palace on high.
I'm the queen of the pronunciation palace. I decree you say it like this.
I still can't. I don't know. It really depends. There's a lot of different, but it seems like your pronunciation is more common. So, all right, you win this time in space, the final frontier.
The Rat Man forgive you this time.
All right, Shaldia. Ugh.
Shaldia.
It
We're on the
hurts
planet
my
Shaldia
mouth.
for half the
Like
book.
an Orbitz
but the rest
in there
of them...
right now.
They're really milling around there. They cut the mouth up. That's why they had to discontinue it, really.
Yeah, exactly. They had little razor blades in
So,
there.
yeah, we're on space. We're on the Enterprise, half the book. We're on the planet Shaldia, the other half the book.
No. It's
the
actually
characters...
more of a 70-30, which I was grateful for. Whenever we were on the Enterprise, I was like, oh, I can smell this scene in my mind. It was like very
How
calming.
do you know what the Enterprise smells like?
I don't know, it smells like being 7 and watching this on a fucking TV in my shitty living room.
Drinking Orbitz.
Drinking Orbitz.
Okay. As for our characters, I feel like it's pretty obvious here. You've got the Star Trek TNG crew, which is like Picard and Worf and Data and the other people on that show.
Geordi LaForge, Deanna Troi.
Okay, yeah, Paris, I didn't watch Star Trek.
Oh.
About Star Trek.
All right, I did, so I watched
Okay,
both
you're
of
gonna
these
help us with that.
things and loved both of them as a child, so.
Yeah, I watched the hell out of some X-Men 90s cartoons here, but we kind of have an X-Men grab bag happening here.
Yeah,
Like, I'm not going to sit here and
didn't
say
like that.
I know all of the X-Men team compositions there ever were, but this one seems like extra random to me. It's not one that I encountered much of. We got Storm as the leader. We've got Wolverine, Archangel, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat. You might know her as Kitty Pryde, which she turns into later, and she's been known for longer than Shadowcat. Banshee, and Colossus. Real kind of fun group here.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I saw Archangel and I was like, who the fuck is that? Like, I did not remember him at all. Even after reading his Wikipedia article, I was like, I got nothing. This guy
I
was
think
just
he
wiped.
was in the really original X-Men squad where they had those really bizarre suits that had like the big yellow or green X across it, and they all had like skull caps happening on them.
Yeah, he was
I think
definitely
he was
present
part of that crew.
in the earlier comics, but I don't remember him from the 90s cartoon, so I was lost on
Yeah,
me.
I think he appeared there like very briefly. Anyway, so we got those. We got the transformed of Chaldia, they're just alien mutants. They're developing mutant powers.
Yep.
Most importantly, though, we have Erid Sovar as our sort of point of view character for all the goings on in the Chaldia space when the X-Men and the Star Trek people aren't down there. And then finally, we have the Drakon, an alien race coming to harvest their crop of superheroes they planted on Chaldia 22 cycles ago. They're just different Klingons, really.
You see, Chris, they have gills and no lips, so that I don't know, that makes them
Different enough, I
yes.
suppose. Just warrior race number 5,743.
Yes, correct.
Okay, Paris, why don't you read the summary that I wrote for this one? I tried to keep it fairly brief and really hit just the main bits here that are important to our discussion.
All right, and we do this summary so that you as a listener don't feel like you have to go and read the book yourselves or have much foreknowledge. We try to hit all the main plot points so that when we are later discussing it, complaining about it, you sort of understand where we're coming from. Thank you to Chris for writing this today, as I have been out of pocket mentally. So, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
On the planet Chaldia, Erid Sovar suddenly develops the ability to turn into a giant cock and cum lasers. Right?
Now listen,
Got me with that
before
first
you go
sentence.
on, I just want to hard stop this summary and say he turns purple and veiny, and they make a lot of to-do about how he shoots white out of his fingers. Just saying. Continue.
You know, you're not wrong, and that is very funny and true. A bunch of other people on the planet are also gaining abilities, although not as penisy. This causes some unrest, since people with powers are dangerous, you see, so the government of Chaldia decides to imprison all the transformed immediately, just jumping right into the highest levels of oppression possible. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, Jean-Luc Picard receives a transmission that the goddamn X-Men have appeared at a random space station, again, because the Enterprise crew and the X-Men know each other already from some previous adventure, where they also booped themselves onto a Starfleet vessel, I guess. Anyway, Picard is like, wait a second, is the Storm Lady there? Because if so, and rushes to pick up the X-Men. Crusher and LaForge try to figure out why the X-Men are back in the Star Trek universe by performing tests. Archangel flies around the hallways of the Enterprise somehow, and it pisses off Picard because the ceilings are only like 9 foot high. They're not that wide.
Yeah, I really don't understand how that works, but we'll get to that.
Wolverine drinks prune juice to prove his manliness to Worf and the bartender, and plays VR fighting games with Worf, where they get to murder a bunch of people on the holodeck. It's great. Banshee talks like a fucking leprechaun. It's embarrassing. Storm flirts with Picard by having tea, and then they have tea at the end, if you get my drift. Colossus, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawlers kind of hang out, and sometimes they befriend the, Starfleet people, and sometimes they just are there, like Colossus. Back on Chaldia, Erid has been imprisoned with the other transformed, but a resistance within the prisoners is forming at the behest of Rahatan, a transformed with earth-moving abilities, who's definitely not on a tiny horse. The guards have stun lasers. They are quickly overwhelmed the moment the transformed fight back. Erid escapes with most of the prisoners, who choose to follow Rahatan, Although he instantly also fast-forwards to murderous tyrant mode. I mean, with a name like Rahatan, really, did he have any choice in his own destiny?
They really gotta lean into it.
Yeah, they escape to a nearby city and take up residence in some abandoned buildings. It's literally like the city you can see from the prison. It is the most obvious place to hide. I do not understand that. But anyway, Picard and the Enterprise receive a distress call when Chaldia is threatened by a space cruiser of the Drakon, who are able to take out every satellite in orbit around the planet, thus breaking communication to the Federation and Starfleet, except for the one that gets the Enterprise just before the cutoff. They space hoof it over to Chaldia and are attacked by the Drakon ship, but through some clever maneuvering and a cross-space teleportation with Nightcrawler and Data, they are able to cripple the Drakon warship enough that it's not an immediate threat to the Enterprise. However, the Enterprise crew and X-Men find out about the transformed on Chaldia, and the X-Men, of course, want to help the fellow oppressed super people. They head down to the planet in squads, with everyone doing the X-Men Star Trek buddy system. Colossus is paired with Troy, Riker is paired with Storm, etc. The Drakon manage to fire a series of bombs that threaten to level a good section of the planet, since they can't pick up their super people, so I don't know, just torch the terrarium, I guess. Picard and Archangel go on a daring mission to disable the bombs by getting in a shuttle, beating the bombs to the atmosphere, and then, like, once the bombs cross over into the atmosphere, Archangel can get out of the shuttle and, like, cut the right wire while they're flying, and I guess that works. Meanwhile, Storm and some of the other X-Men confront Rahatan and defeat him. Turns out the X-Men didn't escape back to their universe in the previous book or something because of Verteron particles, aka classic Star Trek tech babble. They clean them off of them, and then they go back home to, I guess, be oppressed. Well, fuck. Also, turns out everything was orchestrated by Q anyway, so meh.
Fucking Q, man. Always getting his nose in things.
Queuing it up.
Okay, Paris, thank you very much for reading through that. And now we can begin with our rubric discussion here. And we can start off, as we always do, with technical construction. So this is talking about, like, typos and formatting and layout and punctuation stuff. Really, stuff that we want to get out of the way really quick. And in this one, I didn't really catch any typos or punctuation errors.
Yeah, it was fine.
I did have a little bit of a quibble about some of the formatting stuff, namely that sometimes you get these really abrupt perspective switches in the next paragraph. Like, we'll be on the Enterprise, and then all of a sudden in the next paragraph it's like, and then Ered Sovar was, like, doing something down here. Like, on planet Chaldia, there's not, like, even the little break that you sometimes get mid-chapter in other books, like a couple of spaces or something to let you know, like, hey, something is shifting or changing, perhaps time or space. We're just there all of a sudden, which is a relatively minor point, but it just felt weird sometimes. Yeah,
I forget if I made a note of it, but I also had a couple of moments where I was like, whoa, okay, I guess this is a different part of the story now.
I need my comfort space. You need to prepare me. I need to be cued in to when things shift.
Yeah, I need the little line. I just need the little line. Just a little line across the page.
Please.
Honestly...
Please, Father. Just a little line for my brain.
Even just a few breaks, like just some blank space, like that'd be cool.
That's what I say.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I agree though. This was fine. This was clearly edited. I mean, it's very like Scholastic Book Fair level of writing, I'd say.
Yes.
You know, this is something that seems geared towards children. It's very simple. It doesn't, like, I didn't learn a new word in this book. So definitely...
No vocabulary words for English class?
Except for Verteron, maybe, which isn't, I don't believe, real. So, wait.
I don't think you get credit for that one.
Now I'm gonna like, be paranoid and be like, is Verteron a thing? I don't think it is.
It's probably not. I really don't think so. Let's Google Verteron right now and see what comes up.
Nope, just Star Trek wikis. I think we're good.
Okay, good. So it's in Star Trek universe, I suppose. So I guess points for not completely making it up.
There is a Reddit post that says where to get Verteron particles, which I think is hilarious.
What?
I think it's in reference to a Star Trek game of some kind, but it's pretty funny out of context.
Oh, okay. Yo, anyone got those Verteron particles? I've been looking for them.
They describe it as a subatomic particle. But you know, I don't quite, I think they just were like, oh, we need to come up with some type of subatomic particle that in the real world doesn't exist, so we can be like, oh, look, science advanced, we found this thing that has to do with like time and space travel. Because there are subatomic particles that we are aware of, like quarks, for example, or something like that, which you've probably heard of. But anyway, Verterons. That was the only thing I learned.
Verterons.
It's not real.
Found them, it turns out.
But yeah, I mean, it was,
just so you know.
Yeah, it was fine. Again, we're talking, you know, you saved $4 to go to Scholastic Book Fair, and this thing is calling to you from a 3-foot shelf. You know, that's what we're working with.
Anyhow, technical construction, I'll give it the 1.
Oh, I'll give it the 1.
Right along.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Totally fine. Actually,
move right along
wait,
into plot and character.
Before we leave,
I
do want to say that the author, I think, definitely like seemed to know a little bit more about the Star Trek side of things, or at least infused more of that in the book. And I did think the text did a pretty good job of replicating the television show. I watched a lot of it as a kid, and like I said, I could fucking smell the carpets in the Enterprise. Like I was like,
again, I don't think that's the Enterprise. That was your carpet that you're smelling.
No, it was space carpet that I was imagining.
Okay, I'll take your word.
I could like hear the
young Paris's smell childhood.
I could hear like the fucking doors like open like in the book. It was very, very one-to-one.
I definitely heard the Enterprise room tone in my head. You know, that like Star Trek ship drive kind of like thing
and even
that they put in the background.
And when any of the characters were like a little horny, which happens like 3 times, and it's real quick, thankfully. I was like, oh, I can see how this would happen on the show. There'd like the lights would get dim, and you'd get this new angle, and they'd be like, that's just.
Did they do that on TNG? I only watched like 4 TNG episodes in my entire life.
Oh God! All right, Chris, we gotta make Chris like a list of selections. There's one where Deanna Troi gets immaculately impregnated by like a light being.
Cool.
And yeah, there's quite a few, and like Picard is always on the DL like fucking a bunch of characters on the show. Like you never really see it.
Oh, okay.
But it's very much like the book where he and Storm go have more tea in his room. Like that is very directly Jean-Luc Picard and Aurora fucked in this book off screen.
Yeah, so he's just like subtle about it. That's cool.
Yeah,
like he keeps it a little bit low key, which is totally fine.
That's what I want in.
Not like Kirk, right? Kirk was like all up in everyone's face.
Exactly.
All the time.
This is what I want in my books. This is what I want in my Starfleet captains.
Okay. All right. How about are we done with technical
I guess we're already talking about plot characters.
Speaking of Verteron particles here, if we're talking about coherence,
oh, Jesus.
I mean, it's an overall pretty basic, as you put it, Scholastic Book Fair kind of comic book sci-fi TV show plot. I guess if you want to sit here and litigate how a time hook works,
I have a note that says
the general wobbliness
of
crossover fiction.
The fuck is a time hook? Because I was like, what?
Well, you wanna hook the time that you're going to. It's like a zip line, right? Like, so time is a zip line, and it's like always running, and you want to just like hook onto the right time to pull yourself in.
Hang on. I highlighted the explanation from Geordi. So this is where Geordi LaForge is like giving Nightcrawler his like analysis or whatever. And Nightcrawler, if you're not familiar, he can kind of like boop in and out of existence, but it usually has to be like a place he's seen before or has been, I think. Mm-hmm. So anyway, they say, you were gone, all right, for a fraction of a second. It was as if you didn't exist. At least not in this dimension, Nightcrawler noted. The engineer continued to study his readout. Now that's interesting. What is? Asked the mutant. Geordi showed him the tricorder. When you left, there was nothing remarkable about you. But when you came back, you were literally dusted with Verteron particles. Nightcrawler looked at him. Verteron? Sorry, said the engineer. He'd forgotten that in the mutants universe, which was roughly equivalent to his own in the 20th century, Verterons probably hadn't been discovered yet. They are subatomic particles associated with subspace phenomena. Nightcrawler still didn't look enlightened. Subspace? A spatial continuum, said Geordi, with different properties from our own. It's by ducking into subspace that the Enterprise is able to travel at faster than light speeds. In fact, one might call subspace another dimension, which leads us to an interesting question. The mutant tilted his head. That being, whether this other dimension you're traveling through isn't related to subspace. I mean, we don't come out of warp smelling like brimstone, at least I don't think we do, but the presence of those Verterons suggests you're doing with mind and body what we need an entire warp drive to accomplish. Geordi looked at his guest with newfound respect. Let me tell you, if that's true, it's pretty amazing. Nightcrawler stroked his blue-furred chin, his golden eyes fixed on the possibilities, of which there were many. Does that mean, he said, there's a way for me to travel from world to world? Maybe even star to star without benefit of a ship? Geordi thought about it. Maybe, he conceded at last, but then again, maybe not. Nightcrawler looked at him quizzically. You see, the engineer said, even after we enter subspace, we still have to apply a lot of power to move the ship from place to place. It's true, your mass wouldn't be anywhere near that of the Enterprise, but then in subspace, mass isn't really the main issue. In other words, said the mutant, trying to boil down Geordi's comment, it wouldn't be enough just to access this continuum, or whatever it is. I would also have to have a way to propel myself across it. The engineer took a breath, then let it out. I think so, but honestly, I'm just taking a stab at it. I'd have to study you a lot more closely to come up with an accurate answer. Nightcrawler shrugged. I'm game if you are. Maybe later, said Geordi. Right now, I want to run some computer models with regard to those Verteron particles you're wearing. The mutant's brow creased. Why? You think they had something to do with our time hooks malfunctioning? I think it's a possibility, the engineer told him. And if that's the case, said Nightcrawler, it'd be silly not to check it out. Geordi smiled. You said it, not me. So, at least, towards the beginning, they're setting up, I think, a pretty good explanation for sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. It's like they're being a little scientific about it. Like, Geordi's a little unsure. You get Nightcrawler trying to do, like, the layman, give it to me in English, please, kind of thing. Well,
and they're at least talking about things that are conceptually possible in the realm of, like, quantum physics, right?
Yes.
They're not just like, and the Gazali-gook and the who's its, and, and it just becomes fucking dumb. I feel like this is a really good, the author, or I guess whoever he partnered with in either of these, these sort of entertainment franchises did a pretty... Anyway, yeah, I'm still
kind of appreciate that.
Unclear what a time
on,
hook
the
is.
Scholastic book fair level,
yeah.
Right? Like, you're a kid who's like really into the X-Men or Star Trek or perhaps both, and this is like your lucky day. Oh my God, there's a crossover book. And, like this is a way to sort of get a middle schooler child to like get maybe a little interested in the scientific method or something like that, in a very, very light way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing we've ever read, in
Yes.
Although their later explanation of like, well, then we have to go like get the time hook and then like, I don't know, sprinkle the Verteron sprinkles on it, and it was, I don't know, a little confusing, but I think they did the best they could.
Yeah, in this space that they are in, it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, but as for further plot coherence, the whole thing with the Dracon, so they seeded Chaldia with transforming mutant genes that convert 22 cycles or 22, because everyone that is a transformed on Chaldia is 22 years old specifically.
Right.
So it's sort of like a time bomb kind of thing that's happening. And their plan is, okay, we plant this genetic change, we fuck off for a while, we come back 22 cycles later to take all of the people with superhuman or superpower, a super person, super alien, whatever you call it, not necessarily human, abilities. And I'm not sure how they plan to control the superpowered beings once they were captured, because as they demonstrated breaking out of that one prison, if they can just set you the fuck on fire, how are you going to make them part of your army to do space colonialism and conquest?
Yeah, okay, so this is also what I was wondering. I was like, why wouldn't... I don't understand why they didn't just do this to their own genetics.
Also, same. Like, wouldn't if you're all about power and having big, strong people, wouldn't you want your own people to have the superpowers?
Yeah, and I guess even if you are going to, maybe this is their first round of, I don't know, human experiments, and they're like, well, we don't want to mess with ourselves. Like, wouldn't you maybe still raise them in your society or in, like, a more enclosed environment? It just, I don't quite understand.
Why would I want to help the people that kidnapped me off the face of my planet?
Also,
help them conquer other places.
Also, the fact that the genetic engineering didn't kick in until 22 is, like, possibly the worst time to be trying to convince a creature. Like, if they're, because they are just.
I just graduated.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to get
sucks.
like my first good job down, man. I'm not ready to fuck off and help you do space conquest right now. Although on the other hand, maybe that's the best time in some ways, because if it's like the same situation for most 22-year-olds on Earth as it is now, maybe you would take the deal, right?
Maybe.
Like, okay, you gave me the superpowers. I don't have to worry about trying to save up to buy a house anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. The plot is very strange. And it also left me wondering, like, did we even need this other conflict? I mean, I guess I appreciate that it gives an extra layer to the Chaldeans, but then...
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really care enough. I don't know. It just felt like they were like, well, one conflict isn't enough, clearly. Or two conflicts aren't enough, because they had the conflict of helping the Chaldeans, and the other conflict was helping the X-Men get back to their time and place. So, I don't know. They were like, we got a 200-page book. Somehow we need 3 problems going on simultaneously. I don't know.
Not totally unreasonable,
No.
but I mean, the other thing is that this sort of plot where you have transformed people with superpowers, and everyone's scared of them, so they try to imprison them, is super standard X-Men fare. I feel like the X-Men have been doing this plot line almost constantly since a certain point in their creation. So it's really the down the middle easy path for an X-Men plot. And that's not like a bash on that or anything. It's, kind of what the X-Men be talking about a lot of the time. So, but I don't know, man. It just seems a real easy path to take, I suppose.
Yeah, this didn't really do anything new for them, right? Like, they're still, fighting oppression and stuff, which is fine. Again, like we're saying, it's great that we have this whole comic that's sort of become dedicated to that idea, like fighting back against the oppression of marginalized folks. Although my understanding is that it didn't immediately start that way. It, like, took several years, and then after, the 1960s started happening, by the later 60s is when the comic took on those themes, because it wasn't initially conceived in that way. It just sort of happened to fit together with current events. Honestly, though, your brother Adam would probably know about this in far more depth than I would, but that is my understanding. So, yeah, it is great that we have this pop cultural stuff that's, very kind of current and sort of invested in current socio-political affairs. It's interesting, but...
And Star Trek is all about that, too,
course,
right?
Yeah.
Like, Star Trek, notably,
right.
So it's kind of nice that we have these two properties crossing over in this way. I would expect these two crews to be all about this kind of plot here. I guess I don't really have a huge complaint about it being that plot. I just like, what if you just made it the X-Men, right? Like, they're already in the Star Trek universe. So like, when everyone hears like, oh my God, you've got these superpowered people, why don't we try to capture them?
I agree with you. My issue is, it's like, why do we need the Chaldeans or whatever? Also, the Chaldeans are just described like they're regular humans from Earth. Like, that's the other thing that bothers me, is when we have alien races, but they're just humans again. And it's like, okay, this isn't interesting. Like, again, we already have the X-Men at home, and they are, in fact, awesome. Like, we don't need store brand X-Men from planet fucking Chaldea Greens or whatever.
Mom, I want Chaldeanals.
No.
I want Chaldeanals X-Men mutants. We have the X-Men at home.
The X-Men at home are actually pretty great. Yeah, so it did.
Yeah, I know,
feel,
right? In this one case,
it did feel weird. I agree with you. Like, I don't understand why it couldn't have just been, the X-Men and the Enterprise doing X-Men Enterprise stuff. Like, I don't get with the addition of.
You could still have the Drakon or like some other alien race coming in and being like, oh my god, you have people that have healing abilities and someone that can turn into steel.
Agree.
We're going to take them and force them to do conquest stuff for us. Which I guess you could counter like, well, the X-Men would never help them, but why would the Chaldeans
it doesn't.
So,
yeah, I agree with you. That was the problem I had. I was like, God, I don't care about these fucking Chaldeans. Like, there were just never any stakes in this either, and it's partly because of the Chaldeans, but partly because that all the fucking main characters from the X-Men and Star Trek are going to be fine. They do not die in this story. That nothing bad actually happens, so it was boring in that way, because, like, the only people who die are, the lower level crew members and people we don't care about. It's not, no one who we've developed any...
Yeah, those red shirts do get zapped.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's like standard Star Trek fare.
Also, I finally figured out your note about Ditko and Kirby. It took me a second, and then I was like,
It took me like multiple mentions of Ditko and Kirby to like, oh wait, yeah, the Marvel guys. That's what that like. They're
you hadn't written the note.
I also knew that they wouldn't die either. I was like, okay, well, those two red shirts are staying alive. The other ones that barely get a name, they're definitely not long for this planet Chaldia.
Yeah. So I guess it's just sort of predictable and whatever. It wasn't very exciting. I'm
not gonna say it's bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not like a totally incoherent plot, except for the whole Drakons having this plan. Like that was the big incoherent moment that was happening there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk about the character quality here?
All right.
And as we mentioned before, this author definitely has a lot more experience with the Star Trek crew than they do with the X-Men. The Star Trek crew has a little bit of depth to them. I feel like Picard and Worf especially, we kind of linger on them a little bit longer. Worf has this whole thing when he's coming on the Enterprise for the first time because he's been away for a while. And it's like, is it his birthday or something? Like,
oh my god, yeah. And he's like offended that nobody...
Like, no one remembered my birthday. I am sad about this. And then turns out Picard just had a surprise party planned and he's like, yay, everyone remembered it was my birthday. I
forgot about that part of the
Which is cute. That's fine. I like that.
It felt like I was watching a fucking TNG episode from 1996. Like, I was like, okay, again, I just felt like I was reading a play-by-play of a Star Trek episode, so it was very familiar to me. But then the X-Men are like 90s cartoon X-Men, but not even that much. They're like a cartoon in the 90s cartoon. Like, yeah, we're definitely working with like paper doll level X-Men here. Like nobody really gets
Wolverine doesn't even have his like sort of like weird angst that he had in the cartoon or anything.
Nope.
He just walks around to like talk in his Wolverine way and like do VR fighting game stuff with Worf one time.
Yeah, sure am about murdering and clawing, bub. And you're like, did someone leave the Wolverine set to dumb? Like what? like there's a switch that someone forgot to keep turning. It was, and then same. Colossus has no lines in this entire.
I think he speaks twice ever in the like. He appears in like the testing scene with LaForge early on, and then later on he's helping, I think, Troy with a fight.
And then Troy, he like saves,
that's about
he like helps her get away or something. But yeah, and he doesn't say much, and then Archangel is just like, I sure am a rich hot guy that flies everywhere. And then he has like these...
I just want to fly in the halls of the Enterprise. I'm like, bro, is there even like enough room to flap your wings?
Okay.
Because he has a pretty big wingspan, right?
All right, hang on. This is a segment we sometimes do called Paris Does Math About It. It's when I get so mad that I have to do math.
Are you going to look up the fucking hallway dimensions for the Enterprise and then Archangel's wingspan?
Yes,
right now?
Yes.
This is the dorkiest shit ever.
I meant to do this earlier, but as I said, I've lost my grip on reality. So,
God.
No, I want the internal dimensions of the Enterprise, not the external.
You know that's out there, though.
Oh, that's why I was like, oh, I can look this up. Okay. So suppose. Oh, okay. All right. Hang on.
Oh, you're finding data that contradicts your... It's like
No.
the Star Trek Enterprise's hallways are actually 1 mile wide.
Okay, there is a PDF. Please hold. Okay,
fucking blueprints of the Enterprise.
all right, so the established lore is that it is 1,300 feet. Oh, I'm sorry. The established lore is that it was 950 feet, but fans have cobbled together enough evidence to say that it's probably 1,300 feet, actually.
Like long?
Yeah, I think, but I'm not.
I don't care how long.
Yeah,
I just want a
I need
hallway.
the hallway dimensions. God, nerds,
I don't give a shit how
assemble!
long it is?
Get me my diagrams.
Okay, how about this? I'm just gonna look up a picture of a hallway in the Enterprise with like a person
Yes.
standing in it.
Okay, that's a much smarter thing to do than what I'm doing. So let's do that. Corridor width is about 6 feet. Hang on.
What?
It's a hang on. Most of the Enterprise in I guess they might be 14 feet, which is pretty big.
Yeah, I'm looking at those pictures, man. Okay, even so, from the X-Men wiki fandom, wings. Angel possesses the superhuman ability to fly by means of his natural wings, which span 16 feet from wingtip to
All
wingtip.
right, so even
allowing for 14-foot wide, super luxurious Enterprise hallways. He ain't flying, bro.
Also,
He can't if he lacks 2 full feet or 1 foot on either side to like uncurl the wings and flap them.
yeah, it doesn't.
Also, they're not even that high.
No.
It's not like the ceilings are super high overhead. So when Picard is like talking about dodging Archangel in the Enterprise hallways, you would have to fully get prone, right? Like you would have to dive onto the
Not
ground
to mention,
avoid Archangel.
okay, but like they're probably not even 14 feet because like look at the show. I mean, I'm gonna say they're probably 9. But like you said, even with 14 feet. Not to mention, there are other people inside of the hallways. And so there is a scene in the book where Picard is like, stop fucking flying everywhere. Basically, he screams at Archangel, and Archangel's like, what are you, like getting all uppity, and Storm is like, stop fucking flying, you idiot. You're on someone else's ship. This is dumb. And it was so just silly and childish because there's a scene where he's in sickbay and he flies from one side of sickbay to another. Sickbay is like a bedroom. It's very small. Like a small dining room, and he's like, I'm gonna fly. Like, all right, Archangel.
Why couldn't the plot just be Archangel can't fly? He's grounded because there's no physical space for him to do it, and that's where his angst comes from.
I think his angst just comes from being a hot, rich boy, and that's...
I mean, sure.
Because
that's part of it,
There
too.
are some weird... There's, like, 3 scenes where he just finds Deanna Troi, and he's like, look how hot I am. And she's like, yeah, I guess, but who cares? Like, yeah, I guess you're hot, but whatever. And he's like, but don't you want to know more about me because I'm so hot? And she's like, not really.
I'm cool, actually. I saw you fly. I had to dive onto the Enterprise floor, and I chipped a tooth because you were flying around, dude. I'm sorry, I'm not interested.
Also, she's a fucking betazoid, which means she can feel other people's emotions and understand their, like, intent and stuff. So she's the last person you should be trying to, like, trick with your, like, I'm a hot guy. Like, no, she can see into you, you weirdo.
Okay, I will say, like, not the last point, but one of the last points on the characters, Storm had a little bit more to her than the rest because her and Picard with their, like, flirty, we're both the leaders of the teams, let's have tea together kind of thing, gave her, like, a little bit of depth, I think.
And then they did fuck at the very end. Let's not forget.
I'm not so Paris. I don't know how sure I want to land on that. Maybe they did just have another
passage read. Nope, we're doing a passage read. Also, you haven't seen TNG, so
the Star Trek X-Men
you don't
hentai that you've been looking at.
No, I'm saying you never watched the show, so you don't understand the certain cues in the show that make you go, oh,
Okay.
Picard fucked her. Like, that's so hang on. Let me
Got my specialty.
Everyone got up and left the observation lounge. However, the captain lingered. So, he noticed, the storm. She gazed out the window at the stars, as she had that time in his ready room. Commander Riker told me of your exploits in Verdeen, he said. They sounded rather colorful. No more so than your adventure in the shuttle, she replied. Picard frowned. May I ask you a question, Aurora? The mutant turned to him. As you wish. When you first came aboard, he said, we had a conversation. We were talking about the demands of leadership. She nodded. Of course. I said that leaders seldom enjoy stable relationships, which is no more than the truth, as I have observed it. Yes, said the captain, but you also seemed on the verge of mentioning an exception to that rule. Cannot help but wonder. Storm gazed into his eyes. Are you certain you want me to answer that question? To answer it even as I am leaving, most likely never to see you again? Picard considered the wisdom in what she was saying. He took a breath, then let it out. Perhaps not. For a moment, silence reigned in the observation lounge. Then the mutant came over and took the captain's arm. Suddenly, I have an urge for some herbal tea. Picard smiled. As you wish. I feel like they took a beat to think about it and said, fuck it.
Okay.
That's what I read.
I can see either side of it.
It could be either way. It could be either way, but I feel like I've seen enough Enterprise to know.
Okay, fair. Okay, I'll concede. They probably boned. And you know what? I want to say this.
Wait, gotta go back to Google.
This
Did
is a romance
Picard and Storm...
I mean, in someone's fanfic, they definitely did. It's written out entirely.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, there's a whole... Oh, God.
The whole what,
There's a
Paris?
whole thing on the internet about this.
There's always a whole thing on the internet about anything. But, like, is it just people in a comment thread arguing about it? Or is there some canon?
Hang on, I gotta read.
Lore? I'm just watching your eyebrows do motions on the webcam right now, and you just look more and more confused.
I don't even have my eyebrows filled in right now, so they must really be moving around there for you to be able to see them on the... All right, I'm reading the Jean-Luc Picard wiki thing. Damn, he had a mother and father? They really get deep into the lore.
What do you? Of course he had unless he was like established as a test tube baby or something. Of course he had parents.
Oh no, I just forget sometimes how like deep they get into the lore on these characters.
Oh, you mean like they bother to like name them and okay, I see.
I don't know. I feel it's not in his official thing, so maybe I'm wrong.
Of course, because this is like a crossover thing that like probably isn't considered Star Trek canon, so I don't think you're gonna get the answers from like the fandom wiki.
Anyway, back to what we're talking about.
Yeah, we'll probably say that they probably did in this case. They had their tea. Anyway, last note on the character quality here. The Drakon, again, we said this earlier, they're just another warrior race, and warrior races always make zero sense to me. Like when they're all about only strength and like the almost boneheaded level of it, like how do you develop all this technology if everyone's just fighting each other all the time?
I mean, Chris, you do know we are from the United States of America, right? Like we're like the most egregious version of this, and we're existing, and it's unfortunate.
I understand that, but when you turn it up to 11,
yeah,
and everyone in the alien species is all about that shit. Like it feels like you'd have a lot of not tribal, but like, you know, whatever grouping you have.
No, I agree. I agree.
That would
you.
really stagnate a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and it's so silly that they're, like you said, they're just one note, right? They're just a monolith. There's no.
Yes. I just don't like that.
Yeah.
That's really what I don't like. You can have the warrior race as long as a lot of them have like different interpretations of what it means and that.
Yeah, and it's boring when they're all like, we shoot with laser, we kidnap, we enslave. It's like, yeah, okay, it's the 24th century. Can we do this differently? Can we be more like Q over here, who's like, enslaving and fucking with people and living beings in a new and different way.
Sure. Okay. Why not? Okay. So for plot and characters, where are we landing on this score here? I feel like a 0 is warranted.
Yeah. I want to give it less than that, but it's fine.
It's not as egregious as some other stuff. It's, like I said, very down the middle. The way the X-Men are treated is really where it kind of gets, it's sort of on the negative side of things. But I don't think,
well, that and the Chaldeans, the Chaldeans were so annoying and flat, and I fell asleep during those parts during my read. So there you go.
I mean, I'm willing to give it a -1 if you feel that strongly about it. I'm not a strong 0. I'm not a hard 0 here.
It's hard. Yeah, maybe we do leave it at 0, though, because the Star Trek people were pretty well captured. I don't know.
Yes. Let's say 0.
Yeah,
then.
let's say 0.
Okay. Moving into prose and dialogue here. We already read a passage with sort of Geordi doing his tech stuff there. And I feel like if this was posted on a fan fiction website where you probably see the most like IP crossover stuff happening, this would be one of the higher rated ones on the website. Like, it's fine if you're gonna do this kind of a thing. And like you said, the Star Trek stuff especially is pretty decent, I would say.
Yeah.
I have another selection that I have chosen. Would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it?
I definitely need to do more labor today. You have done most of the labor, so I will read.
So this is from around page 106 in the book, and I just thought this was a funny part. Not funny in the way that it was probably intentionally funny. It's just kind of silly, and I think it does a good job of, after we get sort of the tech side, Star Trek stuff from Geordi, this is like the X-Men side of things.
Okay, the character that I'm going to be reading about was very famously played by Whoopi Goldberg on the TV show. So I can't impersonate Whoopi Goldberg. I'm just telling you right now.
I'm not going to ask you to impersonate Wolverine either, Paris. So
yeah, but at least with Wolverine, I could be like, hey,
wait a
Wolverine.
minute. So this scene was between Whoopi Goldberg and Wolverine?
Yes.
I did not get that detail.
Chris, I'm telling you, I'm going to have to take your nerd card away if you don't get through a Star Trek series by the end of this year, because this is serious. You need this basis. You need this base level.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I'm watching the Wheel of Time show, and I'm trying to read the books to try to get that.
Why are you doing that? That is a
DNA.
fucking waste of time. It is such a not worthwhile series.
But everyone, it's part of the fabric of fantasy series.
Yeah, but Chris,
so I just want to know
we've
what's
read
going
so
on.
much Sword of Truth, which directly mainlined the Wheel of Time.
True, yes,
through
that's fair.
bondage
That's
gear.
Fair.
And then, produced another series. You don't need to read it. It's not good. It doesn't get better.
Okay, I'll switch gears into Star Trek. Anyway, read about Whoopi and Wolverine, please.
You can even watch Deep Space Nine instead if you don't want to watch Enterprise. You just gotta watch one of the 90s ones.
Okay, I watched a good amount of Star Trek Voyager because it came on late at night on network TV on Saturdays or Sundays or something at some point. So I've watched a decent handful of Voyager episodes.
I feel like the only reason anyone watched Voyager is because 7 of 9 was on it and everyone was in love with Jerry Ryan in the 90s.
I mean, yes, I was into it because of Jerry Ryan and Janeway at the same time. So you know
wow.
what?
All right. Respect for the Janeway love. All right. How's it going? Gwena asked him, stowing her cloth back under the bar. To tell you the truth, he said, I like it better when the place is hopping. It'll be hopping soon enough, she told him. We've got a shift change coming in 15 minutes. Ben smiled. In that case, let me get my order in. Lieutenant Sovar will have a synth ale. Lieutenant Rager asked for a Gamzane wine, no spices. Robinson is in the market for... Now, why didn't anyone tell me about this place? Someone growled all of a sudden. Now, why didn't anyone tell me about this?
That's a good Wolverine. That's a really good Wolverine. Keep going.
No, I didn't tell you what.
You want me to do Wolverine? Will that help?
Why didn't anyone tell me about this place? I'm drunk already. No, I didn't. No, I can't. No, what? No, Ward.
All right, Paris, I feel like I have to step in here and be Wolverine.
I think so. I'm sorry I failed you.
Okay. I will start with the Wolverine line here. Are you ready? Now, why didn't anyone tell me about this place? I might have come here instead of wasting my time in sickbay.
Turning, Gwyneth saw a powerful-looking figure in blue and yellow enter the place. Plugging himself down on a stool right in front of her, he gazed directly into her eyes.
How's about some service, darling?
Gwyneth recognized the fellow as Wolverine, one of the visitors the Enterprise had taken on recently. Friends of the captain, she reminded herself, so wouldn't do to disembowel one of them with a mixing spoon. Service, she echoed calmly. Oh, you mean a drink? The mutant looked at her askance.
This is a bar, ain't it?
It certainly is, she told him.
Well, I'm looking for something good and strong.
She nodded. One good and strong coming up. It only took a moment to make the mutant's drink. Pushing it across the bar to him, Gwyneth watched him slug it down. Wolverine frowned. Is there a problem? She asked.
Geez Louise, you call this a drink?
Actually, she replied, it's the strongest stuff we serve around here. Of course, that wasn't quite true, but Gwyneth didn't want to start a riot in the place. Wolverine seemed to wrestle inwardly with his next remark.
That's a crying shame, then,
he said. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder, indicating the officer seated at the table behind him.
This may be fine for your Starfleet types, but I'm in the market for something with a kick.
A kick? The bartender echoed.
Uh-huh.
The mutant thought for a moment, then hit on something.
The sort of stuff your friend Worf might cozy up to.
Ah, Gwyneth said. You want a warrior's drink? Wolverine grunted.
You're catching on.
The bartender leaned forward, crooked her finger, and beckoned her guest with it, as if she wanted to tell him a secret. He leaned forward as well. I don't want to embarrass you, Gwyneth said, in a voice so soft only the two of them could hear it, especially in front of all these Starfleet types. But I don't think you could handle the kind of stuff Worf cozies up to. The mutant looked at her and smiled.
That sounds like a challenge, darling.
Maybe it is. Do you accept? Gwyneth asked, returning his smile.
You see, I got this mutant healing factor going for me. Ask Dr. Crusher if you don't believe me. Whatever kind of punishment I take, my body bounces back.
How about that?
I get beat to a pulp, I'm good as new before you can rustle up some band-aids.
Impressive, Gwyneth responded. You can slug down a warrior's drink and still feel fine because of your healing factor. Wolverine merely nodded. Reaching under her bar again, she produced a ceramic mug the size of her head and set it before the mutant. Then she made her way to the refrigeration unit, took out a jug of Worf's favorite drink, and opened the top. Gwyneth poured the dark, pungent liquid into the mug, filling the thing all the way to the top. Then she replaced the top on the jug and watched her guest's nose wrinkle up. He peered into the glass.
What is it?
He demanded. Prune juice, Gwyneth said, smiling. A warrior's drink. She looked at Wolverine, feigning surprise. Unless, of course, you're... say you are. The mutant considered the stuff, then looked up.
You are feisty,
he told her, with just a hint of admiration. Takes one to know one, the bartender noted. She half expected Wolverine to mutter a curse and walk away. After all, a mug of prune juice was a mug of prune juice, but to his credit, he didn't back off from his promise. Picking up the mug, he drained the whole thing, right down to the dregs. When he was done, he wiped his mouth with the back of his gloved hand.
Hit the spot,
he rasped, unwilling to give even an inch. It sure will, Gwyneth agreed.
Yeah, well, see ya.
His responsibility fulfilled, he pushed back from the bar and made his exit from the lounge. Gwyneth shrugged. Then she collected the mutant's empty mug, took another swipe at the bar with her cloth, and surveyed the place. As she had predicted, it was starting to fill up. It wasn't 10 forward, Gwyneth mused, but it was beginning to feel like home nonetheless.
Okay, so I think that's actually a good sort of section to illustrate that. I mean, that is where Wolverine has the most personality out of the whole entire book. I gave him credit. I tried to pick the moment where there was the most material of Wolverine to go by. And yet still, he's a little cartoony, I think. Yeah, so, I mean, as we can see here, hopefully the listeners can hear that as well. It's generally Scholastic Book Fair level stuff, right? It's not bad. It's not amazing. It's pretty functional, and I think easy to understand.
Yeah. The dialogue in some places gets pretty ridiculous. Like, I think you pointed out the Banshee stuff is particularly terrible because they're like, we have to write how an Irish person sounds, and it is painful to read.
Yeah, there's this one line here where I highlighted where Banshee says, or rather, there was a problem, but it's over now, so there's nae reason for him to be sitting in that silly wee brig. And I don't know, man, it just feels real leprechaun-y. That's kind of more Scottish than Irish, too, right? Like, I'm not 100% sure, but...
No, I mean, there's a lot of... there's similarities, certainly, between them, but they do sound distinctly different. I'm terrible at accents, as listeners of this show know. So I can't possibly begin to break it down, but, like, yeah, it was just painful to read. There was actually another character that was probably the most painful read from maybe any book we've read, because all of her dialogue was strung together without punctuation or spaces in an effort to make her a fast-talking sort of ditzy girl, and it was miserable the few times she was on the page. I think her name was Corba, but I just called her Cobra because my brain did that. And so, yeah, there were just a couple characters where, in an attempt to give them personality, it just made them annoying to read. And also, the Banshee one was just like, can we not have a caricature of an Irish person, please? Like, it's just kind of a little gross and weird
about it.
Although, to be fair, I don't remember what Banshee was like in the cartoons or comics, so maybe he was really over the top.
He was definitely that.
Oh, okay, all right. Then maybe that's fine. I don't know. It's not like it was offensive where they were like making fun of him for it or something.
Yes.
But it was a little silly.
I mean, but like just because he was that way in the comics too, I think that it also just feels a little bit over. But I do think it's turned up a little bit. Like Wolverine is turned up a little bit here from his comic book version. It's like slightly higher on the cartoony scale.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to read for prose or dialogue examples? I feel like we got a good smattering of both in the selections that we chose.
This is when the crew of the Enterprise and the X-Men are just realizing that the Drakon ship is like in orbit around Chaldia, and so that's the context of the conversation. Sir, he said, there appears to be a vessel in orbit around Chaldia. A vessel? Picard repeated. He eyed the view screen with new interest. Why have we only now discovered this, Commander? Judging from its position and the likelihood of a geosynchronous orbit, said the android, it was probably hidden from us by the planet. The captain frowned. This was an unanticipated complication. Maybe the Chaldeans requested assistance from someone else, Riker suggested. Picard shook his head. Not likely, Will. The Breen are the only other presence in this part of space. And I just said, I knew it. I knew Neil Breen was an alien.
He pops up here. He's an alien, man. That's why his movies really feel that way.
I also loved that even in this book, we can't get away from the sort of like TV scene in any detective show where they're like, enhance, and they just like keep zooming in and the clarity gets better somehow. There's a point where Picard and Data are looking at something and he's like, maximum magnification, Mr. Data, and then it's like a perfect picture of the planet's surface from millions of miles away. I don't know, it just was funny. Just can't escape it.
Okay. So what are we gonna do for prose and dialogue scoring? I feel like this is another 0, man. Like it's not
it's another
one way or the other.
0.
So it's pretty solid middle of the road kind of deal.
Let me see if I can find some of the Corba stuff because it was so miserable. Do you remember that too?
I do, but like it's hard to convey that in podcast form, like how annoying it is to look at it with your eyes. Like sure, we can talk fast, but it's just annoying to look at and try to parse.
There's a whole section where it's just like 2 pages of it, and I'm like, I wanted to die in that moment. I was like, I can't read this, especially when it's like, and then Korba and Arid snuggled and maybe had a sex, and you're like, I don't care about these characters. Why are we doing this?
You mean
so
the giant
way
penis
it is,
of the fast person? Really? How quickly do you think he got off there?
Really hit it off. Yeah, it's very difficult to explain how annoying it is. I mean, I'll try to read it the way that I imagine it. That's what Ratan did what he did yesterday. Because we're people, not animals, we're not supposed to be caged up. And with any luck, we won't be caged much longer. Ratan wants to break out of this place. Paldul contacted him in his cell. Ratan told him we don't need to stay here any longer. We're not with the powers we got. All we need to do is work together. That's what Ratan says. If we do that, the guards can stop us. It's that every time the character is present, and it is just, it's so hard to visually parse.
And, you know, I get you want to, like, convey that kind of thing in text is a little tricky. That's much better done in an audio medium, I would say. But, like, I don't know, have a better suggestion for that, I suppose. Maybe, like, hyphens between words, at least, to sort of, like, get that feeling of, like, it's attached, but you still can parse it with your eyes.
That's the thing. Like, your eyes cannot parse the words to read them. So, yes, hyphens would be great. Or just mention that the character talks fast in different ways. You're an author, right? Figure it out. Don't punish the reader because you didn't know how to describe a character as talking. I don't know. It was just, I know it's a very small thing, but it was very frustrating because this book was very boring.
Okay. So a 0 on prose and dialogue?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Moving into Terriblo's presence. I mean, aside from the combination of Star Trek and X-Men happening here, like, it kind of, like, raises the eyebrow a little bit, but it's not really, like, terrible. And I'm like, has Star Trek ever crossed over with other properties? They must have, like, a bunch of times, I'm sure.
They must have. I mean, honestly, like we said earlier, I think it's a good cross section of of this sort of thing, especially for the time period. But it does feel like someone was writing a screenplay for oh no, we have to come up with a banger Christmas special this year to compete with some other network or something. Yeah. Like, that's just what I don't know, that's how it felt. But no, Terriblo was off colonizing somewhere else. I don't know.
Sure. It's that, again, that sort of wobbly feeling you get from crossing over different properties like this, that it just, things start to feel a little bit shaky there. I'm curious, like, how often we have seen crossovers like this happen in, like, non-fan fiction website work. Of course, on, like, fan fiction websites, this is all over the place. I can think of, like, a handful. Like, there was an episode of Power Rangers in Space, I think, where the Ninja Turtles showed up. There is the Mortal Kombat and DC games, like, where, like, Batman shows up to fight Sub-Zero and shit.
Oh, I don't remember that. That's funny. All right.
Those are fairly recent. I mean, those are, like, what I can think of off the top of my head. Do you remember any sort of other, like, crossover things happening that were, like, official in a way?
Well, I think there were like inter Star Trek crossovers, right? Because there was, like, Enterprise, Deep Space Nine, the original series.
Yeah, that's still
Voyager.
In universe, though, right? Like, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I suppose I should mention Kingdom Hearts, the game where all the Disney properties crossed over with Final Fantasy. That's kind of like the mega one, I suppose.
Oh, that's weird. That's so weird. Whoever did that.
Oh my god, I would love to do a Patreon episode that is just you reading a summary of the Kingdom Hearts plot, Paris. That's all I want. It's just you
I would love
seeing
to
what
do
is
that.
going on in that series.
Because those games never looked interesting to me, because I never cared about Final Fantasy or, like, Disney stuff when I don't know, I guess around the time that came out. So just missed me completely. So I would love
a bonkers plot that keeps going in, like, opposing directions at all times. So it's like people are also other people who are, like, at the same time a third person who is, like, the original clone of the first person. It's a bunch of that.
Oh god, it's so anime.
Okay. So let's say for Terriblo's presence, this is a 1 because it's it's fine. Like, I don't think he's doing much chaos here.
No, he was doing chaos in my life, not
Yes,
not
in
in
our
the
personal
book.
lives.
He came out of the page. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Okay, so we'll give that a 1. So let's head on over to should this exist, and we have divided this into sort of 4 sub-questions to get us thinking about this kind of thing, with the first one being, would readers of this genre enjoy this? And I mean, I guess if you're into the crossover thing, and like we said, you're like a middle school kid that likes both Star Trek and X-Men, this is like Christmas coming early.
Yeah, like me as an 8-year-old clutching, you know, all the change I've gathered from my house and saved from last year to purchase a book, like, I would be interested in this. I don't know if this is the one I would buy. I would probably make note of it and then get it from the library because I was a library child. So, but yeah, I mean, this would have my attention. I watched both of these things pretty religiously when I was this age, so yeah, if you're like a elementary school or middle school kid and you're into this stuff, sure. But like a random adult, absolutely not. I cannot imagine like me at 35 right now, I'm like, this felt like it just felt like Scholastic Book Fair stuff.
And it's like very middle of the road too. I don't think it necessarily does
yeah.
anything crazy cool with either of the properties that it's working with here.
And you know, Chris, after reading Dear America, I just feel like the bar is so much higher because I'm like, I could pull one of those off the shelf. But yeah, so
I suppose readers may enjoy this for the target audience.
Yeah. And in terms of like the author's goal, right? Like, do we think the author met his goal? I just said this, but it just really had the feel of like, we need a good Christmas special to compete with the other network in 1996 or something. So I don't know.
Like,
I think
week. Let's get the X-Men in on the Star Trek shit. Come on.
Yeah, like I think the author met their goal because it seems like the author's goal was just to write a passable, serviceable crossover for, you know, to receive a paycheck, which, you know,
the goal was met.
Kind of all this guy did is write, you know, these little novels about Star Trek primarily, right?
And like, hey, cool for you for getting your bag that way. That's like living the dream as far as I'm concerned. So
fine. It's fine. It's just not highbrow or even middlebrow literature, man. It's just sorry.
So
it's not
like
very
the next
enjoyable.
question, like, does it add anything new or interesting or novel? Yeah, the crossover certainly is. But aside from the fact that it is happening, nothing interesting is done with that.
No, it's very boring.
And did it take something from us? I mean, no, it was pretty short and down the middle, so it was relatively painless in comparison to a lot of the other stuff that we've read.
I mean, it was so short and it was like easy to read, but man, I fell asleep so many times. So like I said, I've had a really, really busy couple weeks. Because like my husband's on a long tour, so you know, wah, poor me, I have to do everything myself. I know, bitch. But I've also had like busy weeks at work. You know, my boss was on vacation. I don't know. I've had a lot of music stuff to do. It's just been, you know, and now we're in like recording mode for a couple weeks, so it's just been nonstop. So I have been fucking exhausted. And so for this whole week, I would like tuck into bed and be like, all right, I'm going to read 100 pages. This thing was what, 260 pages?
Yes.
And I'd like read 30 pages and fall asleep. And like it just kept happening. Sometimes I'd read 10 pages and pass out and wake up an hour later and be like, oh no. Like,
drooling on the Kindle.
It got to the point where I engaged a speed read protocol for all of the Shaldia stuff and just regular read the Star Trek stuff, and that helped.
Okay, fair enough. So it sounds like we're landing on kind of another solid 0 here.
Yeah. It certainly is a book that is bound in paper that you can read if you're a nerd.
Yes.
But I don't know that if you had choices that this is the one you would choose, I guess.
Agree. Okay, so final score. Technical construction, a 1. Plot and characters, we landed on 0. Prose and dialogue, we landed on 0. Cerebro's presence, we got a 1. And should this exist, we got a 0. 2 out of 5 here, Paris, which is, I think, actually the most, like, down the middle, you made a book score that is possible,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like that's all this guy was going for, so...
Yeah.
Fine.
Congratulations. Nice job, Michael Friedman. Okay, but can we fix it, Paris? And to me, I mean, like, again, I just want a little bit more from some of the characters. There was the start of that with Picard and Worf and Storm. I mentioned that, like, why can't Archangel just be mad about not being able to fly and feel angry about that instead of just, like, doing it and getting in everyone's way and kind of, like, in a very childish manner? I can't believe I'm saying this, but I liked the Picard Storm interaction and the flirting about leadership. Like, I actually could have used a little bit more of that and discussions about the nature of leadership or anything like that. In general, it just feels like a down the middle version, first pass at what a Star Trek / X-Men story would be, but somehow it's the second story that this person has done that in. I wonder if the first one was a lot better.
And it's like his, like... I mean, it's like his, like, 30th book or so. I'm right. This guy has, like, a lot of writing credits before he got to this. Yes. So that's the other thing that kind of makes me feel like I'm expecting a little bit more here, you know? So it's kind of a bummer that this is all we get. Yeah, not great. Not great.
Okay. Do you have anything to add on how to fix it, Paris?
I mean, I feel like you sort of covered it. It needs more depth. And, like, here's the thing. Even if you are writing for a younger audience or a more general audience, you gotta give kids more credit. You gotta give your audience a little more credit. They can handle a little bit more complicated, nuanced stuff. Like, it does not have to just be the good guys fight the bad guys in space, you know. I don't know, it just doesn't have to be that boring and simple. So yeah, just really, I just feel, and also I feel like if you're already working with extant properties like this, like, you know, extant worlds and stuff, you gotta do something different. I mean, also these shows were interesting and had a lot of value for what they were doing, so to take them, cross them, and then come out with something even, like, blander than the original ingredients is just unfortunate. Like, it's just
I agree.
A bummer.
Also, just a little side note here that I forgot to mention during the episode, but I feel like out of all the people to pick for a leadership role for, like, doing superpowered stuff in space, Storm's kind of the worst one. There ain't no weather around to do much.
There's no atmosphere in space. Yeah, I am also confused by this. I guess unless you want to, like, test her in different atmospheres on different planets.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Like, Shaldia had, like, she does it on Shaldia when she's down there, of course, but, like, on the Enterprise, you can't.
But again, that planet,
can she, like, take control of, like, the oxygen system or something like that? Perhaps, but she doesn't do that. So, like,
yeah, like, I want to see what happens when we're like, all right, let's let Storm into Venus and see what happens. What happens when Storm's in Jupiter, or, like, you know?
Oh shit! Actually, that would be rad.
Like. Yeah, like, planets with different atmospheres. That would have been awesome, but instead, they're like, no, she's just gonna go down to this planet that is just Earth with a different name, basically. It doesn't even have interesting terrain. It's just Earth again. God, damn it. Just, again, space is vast and unknowable and so different.
Varied, perhaps.
Yeah, it's like, can we please get a little more interesting?
Or, like, you know, throw Wolverine into a sun and he comes out the other side healed, or, you know, something like
amazing. Yeah, like Wolverine versus the sun, a gas giant versus an adamantium man.
There's a thing that's close to a sun that he has to be deactivated, and Wolverine's the only one that can withstand it because he's got the healing factor, so he can get close enough where he's, like, constantly burning and rehealing.
Amazing. Yes. I want this. This is what I want. I want an eternally crisping Wolverine nugget floating through space.
I'll fix your shit, darling. He's just a little chicken nugget Wolverine with, like, the little ears on the mask. So.
Whoopi Goldberg just watching from the bar window, like, In the bar.
All right. Well, thank you, Fred, for allowing
thanks,
us
Fred.
to read this property
Fred,
crossover.
I'm wondering what Fred's motivations were. He just sort of like popped up, gave us a small pile of money and asked us to read this and then left. And I'm like, really? This is what you burned that on? I guess.
Sure. I guess. Get your money. I hope you got your money's worth.
What's going on, Fred? Yeah, what's going on, Fred? I'm so interested to know. I really want to know why you asked us to read this. Like, what were your motivations? And also, maybe come back sometime. You don't have to. You can go back to Shaldia. It's fine.
Right. Well, thank you, Fred, and thank you to the rest of our patrons. Thank you to our bad bookworms, Emily, Ben, Renee, Scott H., Donnie, Anya, Lycoris, Jakub, Jared, and Will. Our exacting editors, Rudy Bo Booty, The Ugly One, Emmy, Harry 7, Funny Robot with Antennas, David, Martin S., Kieran D., and Greg. Our loathsome librarians, Yanka, Of the Void, The Taco-Eating Unicorn, Robin, Austin, Patricia, Beast with the Least, Veronica, Lucek, Senia, and Arant. And our pesky publishers, Julius the Nice Dragon and Miles May. And of course, thanks to our ever-faithful Kiwi Thing as a Ko-fi donor, and Martin F. as well, and Brenna, who helped relieve us of terrible books. If you want some terrible books that we have hard copies of that we read for the show, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page. Will anyone accept the challenge to become an arch-archivist this year? What heinous, monstrous tome will you force us to read? Waha! All right, Paris. I am off to fly around in a tight hallway. That's what I'm going to do. Be a jerk about it and just annoy the shit out of everyone. And have
Chris, you have to
hang out with my friends.
You have to just appear in someone else's house and then just zoom through their hallways while they're like carrying tea around, and then they'll scream at you, and then you'll be Archangel.
I spilled my tea. I was trying to go have sex with my girlfriend with the tea. Now I can't do that.
All right. Well, thank you for tolerating unhinged, exhausted Paris today. You got one more episode of this coming at you, though, so prepare yourselves. Gird your loins.
Right. They are girded. Bye, Paris.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audio-visual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com.
How's it going? Gwendon asked him, stowing her cloth back under the bar. To tell you the truth, he said, I like it better when the place is hopping.
This is actually a good Wolverine.
Oh, wait, that's not Wolverine. This is someone else. Shit. What if everyone talks like that? That's what we're doing. Okay.